Have you ever felt lightheaded after a meal and thought it was just age? Have you ever felt tired, heavy-headed, right after eating, even though you were completely fine before? And what's stranger is that you don't have diabetes, no high blood pressure, your heart's okay, your tests show nothing unusual. But you still feel foggy, forgetful, and mentally drained, especially after lunch or dinner. So many people have told me this. They assume it's just normal aging. But to me, a brain specialist is an early warning sign. Have you ever noticed that you don't drink water before meals? It sounds trivial. An act that seems to have nothing to do with the brain. But the truth is, that forgotten glass of water is causing millions of older adults to gradually lose blood flow to the brain without even knowing it. I'm not talking about drinking lots of water every day, everyone knows that. I'm talking about the timing of water. And that timing, if missed, can make your brain feel like a garden left unwatered right when the sun begins to burn. The brain has no water reserve. It needs blood, and blood needs water to flow. When you skip a glass of water before eating, and blood rushes to your stomach for digestion, the brain enters a state of temporary drought. And you may start to feel sudden fatigue, shortness of breath, slower speech, or sometimes a pause of stillness for no clear reason. Have you ever seen someone like that? Or have you ever felt that way yourself? Today, I'll share with you why drinking one glass of water 30 minutes before a meal can help your brain circulate blood better, feel clearer, and even gently improve their memory. And I'm not just talking theory. I'll tell you the story of Mr. Walter, 72 years old, a man in Illinois who nearly collapsed simply because he didn't know that skipping a glass of water meant skipping the flow of blood that feeds the brain. You might think, it's just one meal, what's the harm? But some things have truly happened, all because that glass came too late. Let me tell you about one evening that seemed ordinary but almost cost Mr. Walter everything. The unexpected dizziness in the glass of water that didn't arrive in time. You thought your brain was fine, until it lost balance just because you stood up after a meal. Not after jogging. Not after a sleepless night. Just getting up from a chair, after a normal dinner. And suddenly, you couldn't control your body. This isn't rare. It's happening to thousands of older adults in the US every week. And the scariest part is, no one thinks the cause could be a glass of water not drunk. I know that sounds strange. But to help you understand better, let me tell you the story of Mr. Walter, 72 years old, living in Springfield, Illinois, a man whose brain stopped receiving enough blood just 30 seconds after dinner. His brain was no longer receiving enough blood. That evening, he and his wife had just finished their usual meal of grilled meat and mashed potatoes. A completely normal dinner like hundreds before. He stood up to clear the dishes just a few steps toward the sink, and suddenly his vision went dark. His legs froze. His hand dropped the fork. His whole body tilted forward. If it weren't for Mrs. Nancy catching him from behind, he would have collapsed onto the cold tile floor. She called an ambulance. His heart was steady. Blood sugar is fine. Blood pressure is not alarmingly low. But he couldn't form a full sentence. His head throbbed. His body had lost orientation. The next day, I examined him. When asking about his eating habits, I paused at one small detail. Do you drink water before meals? He looked up, breathed out, no. I only drink when I'm thirsty. And usually that's after eating. And that's what most of the people I see usually say. A delay is seemingly harmless, but it reduces blood flow to the brain exactly when it's needed most. After 60, your blood doesn't circulate as flexibly as before. After every meal, blood needs to shift to the stomach to help with digestion. But the brain is still working, still needing a steady supply. If you haven't had water beforehand, there's not enough pressure to push blood to the brain, and the nervous system starts to power down. I often compare this to a convoy delivering supplies. If you don't fuel up first, once the trucks turn to serve the stomach, the brain, being the final stop, won't get anything delivered. Mr. Walter wasn't lacking nutrition. Wasn't missing supplements. Didn't lack vitamins. He was just missing one glass of water at the right time. And sadly, he didn't know his brain needed water before the meal, not after. Have you ever seen a loved one stand up from the table and need to grip the chair? Have you ever felt slightly dizzy after lunch but brushed it off as just getting old? No. Aging isn't the reason. The dryness in blood flow to the brain is what matters. If Mr. Walter had been alone that evening, if help came just 5 seconds later, everything could have turned out differently. And maybe you wouldn't be hearing this story from me today. But he made it to see me. And by adjusting one seemingly small habit, his body had the chance to restore its natural balance. No medication, no machines. So why can a glass of water before a meal change the entire flow of blood to the brain? Why is 30 minutes before eating considered the brain's golden window? That's what I'll explain next, by showing you exactly what happens inside your blood vessels every time you eat without water. Blood flow pressure and the brain's golden hour. Have you ever wondered why just one meal can take you from feeling alert to heavy-headed and tired? And why does that feeling usually come after lunch or dinner, but not in the morning? The answer isn't in the food you eat. It's in how blood moves through your body after eating, and how the brain is forced to give way to the stomach if there's no proper preparation. Imagine the blood in your body as a smart irrigation system. It's always trying to deliver its precious water to where it's needed most. When you eat, the stomach immediately signals for blood to start digestion. It's like a factory suddenly going full speed and needing fuel right away. And blood, loyal like a messenger, will temporarily reroute to the belly, to help the stomach churn, release enzymes, and absorb nutrients. But when blood floods the abdominal area, your brain, which never takes a break, starts to thirst quietly. It doesn't scream. It doesn't hurt right away. It just sends soft signals, a slight dizziness, a touch of fog, a blank moment in your head you can't quite name. If at that moment, the body lacks enough water in the vessels, blood pressure drops. And the flow to the brain weakens. Like trying to water a plant at the top of a hill with a hose lacking pressure. This is why I call the 30 minutes before a meal the golden hour for the brain. Because if you drink water beforehand, the blood has enough volume, enough dilution, enough pressure to support both the stomach and nourish the brain without interruption. But if you wait to drink water after the meal, by then, the blood has already been depleted. Your brain is like the last kid in line waiting for milk, and if the milk runs out, it waits in hunger. I've met so many patients who complain of dizziness after meals, afternoon confusion, a heavy-headed feeling with no clear cause, and sadly, most of them had no idea that a simple habit like drinking water a bit earlier could change all of that. Let me remind you, no pills needed. No extra cost at all. Just a glass of plain water, 200 milliliters, 30 minutes before lunch or dinner. It is enough to keep blood flow to the brain steady. I once told a patient, your brain is still strong, it's just waiting to be hydrated at the right time. And the look in his eyes, I'll never forget. He had lived nearly a full life without anyone ever telling him this. If you're hearing this today, try looking back at your past week. Were your most tired moments of the day often after meals? Maybe that wasn't fatigue. Maybe it wasn't aging. Maybe your brain was experiencing temporary low blood flow due to missing water at the right time. In a moment, I'll share the 14-day story of Mr. Walter and how just one small glass of water helped him stop feeling dizzy, stop feeling confused after dinner. And the special part is, he felt the change clearly from the very first week. One glass of water in 14 days that changed memory. Would you believe just one glass of water at the right time, after 14 days, helped a 72-year-old man regain his ability to remember details throughout the day? No brain supplements. No strict diet changes. Just drinking water 30 minutes earlier before meals. After his near fall in the kitchen, Mr. Walter came back to see me with a very honest question, "Doctor, can a glass of water help?" I didn't answer right away. I simply said, "Try it for 2 weeks. Nothing complicated. Just drink 1 glass of plain water, about 200 milliliters before lunch and before dinner. Each time about 30 minutes before eating." He agreed. Didn't expect much. But his wife, Mrs. Nancy, was the one who noticed it most. And after just 5 days, she sent me a message. For the first time in months, Walter finished dinner without needing to sit quietly for a while to feel clear again. On day 9, he said, I remembered where I put my keys. I didn't have to ask Nancy over and over like before. And my head feels lighter, really, doctor. We often think memory must be restored with exercises, supplements, ginkgo biloba. But sometimes, memory is just a child left forgotten in the dark waiting for a strong enough blood flow to bring the light back. When blood flows more steadily to the brain, the hippocampus, which handles short-term memory, gets better circulation. The prefrontal cortex, which directs focus, also works more efficiently. And your body begins to recall what was never meant to be forgotten. By day 14, Mr. Walter returned, smiling. Nancy says I talk faster than I did before retirement. No more silence after meals. No more hesitation while telling stories. No more having to retrace his memory every afternoon. I'm not saying everyone will change exactly like Mr. Walter. But I know from hundreds of elderly patients in the US that's how your body always responds to things that are simple and right. You just haven't given it the chance. One well-timed glass of water does more than help blood circulate. It's a gentle message to the brain, you still matter. You're still being cared for. Have you ever forgotten where you left your phone? And blamed it on getting old? Have you ever asked the same question just 10 minutes after hearing the answer? Maybe it's not age. Maybe your brain is waiting for something small at just the right time. Right now, you might ask yourself, then why do so many people drink water and still see no change? The answer lies in very common misunderstandings. Maybe they drink water at the wrong time. Maybe they drink too much or too little, or drink while eating. To understand better, let me walk you through each mistaken belief so you not only do it right, but also understand why your brain truly needs it. I'll walk you through those small missteps that have kept millions of people from gaining the full benefits of this simple habit. Dangerous misconceptions about drinking water. Have you ever heard someone say, "Don't drink water before meals, it will dilute your digestive juices"? Or, "Just drink when you're thirsty, don't force it"? Sounds reasonable. But in my clinic these exact pieces of advice have caused many older patients to gradually lose memory control, lose balance, and worse, miss early warnings from the brain. 1. Only drink when you feel thirsty. This is especially dangerous for those over 60. Because after this age, the body's thirst detection system weakens. You don't feel thirst as clearly as when you were younger, but that doesn't mean your body has enough water. The brain still needs water. Blood still needs pressure. But the thirst signal no longer arrives in time. And the result is that you live in a quiet state of dehydration, while thinking everything is fine. And from that silence of thirst, we move to another misconception where even the right habit of drinking water is seen as harmful. 2. Don't drink water before meals, it'll dilute your digestive fluids. This is one of the most common myths. The truth is, drinking a moderate amount of water 30 minutes before meals does not dilute stomach acid, but instead helps activate digestion, prepares the stomach to receive food. A top gastroenterologist at Mayo Clinic once said, Water before meals helps soften the stomach lining and regulate intestinal movement. It does not dilute digestive enzymes. But even if you overcome these two misunderstandings, there's still another very common mistake, thinking that the more water you drink at once, the better. 3. The more water you drink at once, the better. The truth is, drinking too much water at once, especially right after eating, can cause bloating, fatigue, and reduced brain blood flow. The brain needs a steady stream of water, little by little, not a sudden flood. Imagine watering your garden. If you dump a whole bucket on the plant at once, the roots won't absorb it well. But if you water gently, drop by drop, the soil will soak, the roots will drink, and the plant will thrive. Even if you drink enough water or space it out, if it's not plain water, your brain is still missing what it truly needs. 4. Any kind of drink counts as long as it's liquid. I've met patients who thought drinking coffee, juice, or soda is still hydration. But caffeine is a diuretic, and sodium increases osmotic pressure. They don't replace plain water. The brain doesn't need flavored liquids. It needs pure water to maintain electrical conductivity, blood dilution, and pressure in the vessels. And even when you choose the right kind of water, there's still one crucial factor left: timing. 5. I drink enough water throughout the day, timing doesn't matter. This is a deadly misunderstanding. The brain doesn't just need enough water. It needs it at the right time to keep blood pressure from dropping. Especially 30 minutes before meals, when blood is about to be redistributed throughout the body. I once told an elderly woman in Texas, "You drink well, but if you drink at the wrong time, it's like preparing food but serving it after the guests have already left." These small misunderstandings have cost millions of older adults their chance to improve memory, maintain balance, and protect their brains. Have you believed any of these? If so, you're not alone. And the good news is, you can change starting today. And to start correctly, let's build a very simple habit together, one that can open the gates for blood to return to your brain every day. 3-step guide: turn water into a brain-saving habit. We've talked a lot about drinking water at the right time to help blood reach the brain. But exactly how? Do you make it part of your daily life? Not everyone remembers. Not everyone likes drinking water. And not everyone truly understands when the right time is or how much is enough. In many years of working with patients over 60, I've realized, what makes a habit last isn't willpower but simplicity, memorability, and emotional closeness. So I want to share with you the 3 simplest steps to make a glass of water not just a habit but an act of care for your brain. Step 1. Set a reminder 30 minutes before lunch and dinner. Don't rely on memory. Even the sharpest minds forget to drink water when they're busy, tired, or off schedule. Use a phone, an alarm clock, or even a sticky note on the fridge. Mrs. Elaine, 78, from Minnesota, once told me, "I use the wind chime in the kitchen. Whenever it rings, I know it's time to drink water for my brain." A habit begins with a signal. And a little chime can awaken an entire circulatory system. Step 2. Drink about 200 milliliters of plain water, sit upright, breathe deeply. No need to force too much. 1 small glass, 200 milliliters of plain water is enough. Sit upright. Take a slow breath. Then, sip, don't rush. This isn't just drinking water, this is empowering your blood to flow the right way. Many people get this step wrong, drinking while standing, or gulping under stress. And then they think water doesn't help. Step 3. Link the act of drinking water to a vivid image. You know why people remember to brush their teeth but forget to drink water? Because there's no image tied to it. That's why I often tell patients to imagine, the glass of water before meals is your train ticket, allowing blood to stay on track. Or more simply, this is the glass that opens a window for your brain to breathe. Pick your image and hold on to it daily. Because your brain doesn't memorize actions, it remembers the feelings attached to those actions. Just those 3 steps. Not complicated. Not forced. But enough to create real change, as I've seen in dozens of my patients. I still remember Mr. Joseph, 80 years old, living alone in New Jersey, who said after trying this habit, "The afternoon isn't hazy anymore, doctor." I remember reading the paper, and I remember what it said. A simple sentence. But to me, it's as precious as a miracle. And for you, I hope you, too, will feel that shift just after a few days of doing it the right way. However, this positive change doesn't come from water alone, it comes from soft persistence, and listening to the signals from your own body. The brain softens after 3 weeks of practice. There's something fascinating I often observe in older patients. After 3 weeks of drinking water at the right time, they don't just remember their faces better. They also look softer. I call it the brain softening effect. It's not a medical term, but a very real feeling when an older person has escaped the silent tightness inside their head. Mr. Frank, 75, from Portland, described it this way: "Before, every afternoon, I felt like my head was wrapped tight, like someone had bandaged my forehead. Now I don't feel that anymore. My head feels softer, not tense up like before." This effect doesn't happen immediately. It begins around week 3. When blood flow to the brain becomes more stable and consistent, thanks to the habit of drinking water at the right time. When blood is delivered steadily before each meal, temporary pressure in the brain is released. Tiny capillaries constrict less. The brain reduces microcirculation disturbance. The parasympathetic nervous system functions better. As a result, fatigue after meals disappears, afternoon memory improves, and alertness lasts longer into the evening. Some patients told me, "I don't doze off at 5 p.m. anymore. My head doesn't react sluggishly like before. I read, and the words seem to soak in faster." And not just that. Many noticed subtler changes, more natural conversation, no longer searching long for words. Facial expressions are more fluid. That's the brain being released like muscles after being warmed up. When I asked Mr. Frank why he kept this habit for 3 months straight, he simply smiled and said, "Because I feel like I came back to life. This head isn't a burden anymore, it's my companion." I'm not saying drinking water alone solves everything. But for many people, it's the first step to reconnect interrupted blood flow, to reconnect with memory, alertness, and feelings that were once shattered by the years. Have you ever felt your head thick in the afternoon? Have you ever stared out a window, not knowing what you were thinking? Maybe your brain hasn't slowed down. Maybe it's just waiting for you to send it water at the right time. And just like Mr. Frank, Mrs. Elaine, or Mr. Walter, many people after 60 are finding themselves again, thanks to one simple habit no one ever mentioned before. But if you need one more reason to believe this works, let me share with you a deeply healing story from a woman in Florida who once lost the most important memories of her life. Healing story, Mrs. Martha, Florida. There are small things that happen in life, but they leave people in silence for a long time because of pain. For Mrs. Martha, a 74-year-old living in Tampa, Florida, it began on a Wednesday morning. That day, she stepped out with a bag of trash. Then she turned back and stood frozen in front of her own house. And couldn't remember which door was hers. Not because she got lost, But because in that moment, she couldn't be sure which door belonged to her. Her neighbor, Mr. Benj, saw her standing there, so he ran over and asked, "Are you okay? Is something wrong?" She said nothing. Just shook her head and turned inside. Then called her son in New York. That was the first time she admitted, "I forgot how to get into my house." When she came to the clinic, I asked about medications, blood pressure, diabetes, and sleep. Everything was fine. Then I asked, "Do you usually drink water in the morning? Before eating?" She shook her head, "I only drink after meals. Always have." I didn't promise her anything. I simply suggested, try drinking a small glass of water 30 minutes before breakfast every day. Just that one thing. Do it consistently for 2 weeks. Then come back and tell me how you feel. The first week, not much changed. But by day 9, she noticed something strange. She read the morning paper and didn't have to reread the second line. She remembered where she put her keys. And most importantly, she came home from the store without opening the wrong door again. By the third week, her son called, and she described in detail the afternoon at church, each familiar face, each hymn. Her voice was soft, bright. When she returned to the clinic, she said, "I didn't think a glass of water could bring such a sense of safety. Every morning, when I drink water, I'm not just soothing my body, it feels like I'm sending a message to myself. I'm still here. I still remember. I'm still fully alive." We often think memory fades only with age. But in truth, memory is like a musical instrument. If there's not enough humidity, the strings loosen, the sound warps. Mrs. Martha didn't have Alzheimer's. She wasn't experiencing dementia. She just lacked the right nourishment at the right moment for the blood flow to her brain, and that started with the first glass of water each day. If you feel your memory is slowing down, if you've had a vague morning for no reason, or find yourself unusually quiet after meals, let Mrs. Martha's story be a gentle invitation. No medicine needed, no big lifestyle change. Just one glass of water at the right time, every day, so your brain knows you're still listening to it. I believe you can find that too, because the body can always heal when we choose to be gentle with it. And to bring it all back together, return to the beginning. You and your brain are only one glass of water apart. You and your brain only one glass of water apart. I know you may have heard many things in this video. But if you remember only one thing, remember this. You don't need to do more, you just need to do it right and do it consistently. Just one glass of water, 200 milliliters, 30 minutes before each meal can be the line between confusion and clarity, between a blurry afternoon and an alert one. We've walked through a journey together, starting from Mr. Walter's dizzying moment, just because he forgot to drink water before dinner. Then we understood why blood pressure to the brain drops after meals, and why the brain is the last to receive blood if there isn't enough fluid in the vessels. We said that 14 days changed Mr. Walter's memory, just by drinking water at the right time. Then we unraveled the common misunderstandings about drinking water that many people fall into. We learned 3 simple steps to turn drinking water into a loving habit for the brain. And we reached the softening, calming effect of the nervous system after 3 weeks of practice. Finally came the healing story of Mrs. Martha, who found her way home and back to herself from one small change that no one had told her before. None of this came from medication. not from machines. It came from one small, consistent action and from the gentle decision to care for oneself. You don't need to wait for someone else to take care of you. You don't need to go to the hospital to know what your brain needs. You just need one glass of water at the right time each day and a quiet belief that your brain is still here, still wants to walk with you. If you found this video helpful, please click like to share this small but truly meaningful value. If you've experienced anything I've shared, leave a comment so others know they're not alone. If you think someone in your family, a friend, an older loved one needs to hear this, share this video with them, as a gift from your heart. And if you want to keep receiving healing stories, small habits that protect the brain, memory, and nervous system after 60, follow the Thrive 60 Plus channel. Because we don't just live, we can live awake, live fully by reconnecting with ourselves through one glass of water each day. I'm a doctor, but today, I'm just a friend reminding you of that. Thank you for walking with me to the end of this journey. We'll see each other again in the next video. You and your brain are true, only one glass of water apart.